No one is a perfect Sorare player, but what takes you from good to great is knowing about the market in general and not just about specific players. People always ask me, should I buy this player? Should I buy that player? Really, it doesn't matter. What matters is how you view the overall market and how you go about searching for those players that are undervalued. Any player can provide a certain amount of value. What you really want to decipher is this player going to provide more value than the price that I'm paying for him? The easy way to do this is to break players into different tiers and then compare the players in each specific tier and figure out what the market price is for that tier, and then find guys that are a little bit cheaper than that. Today I'm going to teach you the different market tiers and what questions you should be asking in order to figure out which of your players fits in which tier. So first, let's go through the overall tiers. So our tiers are elite, not quite elite, solid and consistent, young, and everybody else. Those are really the only tiers that you need to worry about. So with elite, pretty self-explanatory. These are the best of the best. These are the guys that are going to consistently win you rewards week in and week out. Not quite elite is that tier right below those guys that are still very, very useful, but they're not quite the same level. So you don't want to put the premium that you put on elite guys. You want them to be more in touch with the general player base, but they have a premium as compared to everybody else in the general base. Then you have your solid and consistent guys. These guys probably aren't going to win you too many cards, but they're going to be perfect for your ETH grind. So thinking defensive midfielders, really, really solid center backs, guys that are consistent every single week. Maybe you don't want to build your limited team around them. Maybe you don't want to build a rare America team around them, but a rare all-star team you would potentially look to build around. And then you have your young guys. So your guys that you think are going to break out, your guys that you think are underrated. Before we get into the questions to ask to figure out the tier of your player, we have a big announcement to make. Big shout out to Patrick, who's been working really, really hard on the Discord for the MLS Card Guy community. It's going to be a community where hopefully we can kind of mobilize the US version of Sorare and have a few live meetups and everything like that. So it's going to be hopefully the hub for anything American that has to do with Sorare. So big shout out to Patrick on that one. The link to join the Discord will be in the description. So what are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself in order to determine what tier a player is in? First, you want to know what position the player's in. You want to know what division they're eligible for. Guys that are in the U23 division get a little bit of a premium boost on theirs. Guys that are in Champion Europe also get a little bit of a premium boost. Then you want to know how good the actual player is. So to do that, you're going to look at the last 40 score. Form can come and go. Last 5 score can be a little bit deceiving. Last 15 is a little bit better. But a lot of times the last 40, a whole season worth of data, is typically going to tell you how good the player is. Next, you want to determine if that year was good or if that year was a disappointment. Some guys have bad years. It happens. They're likely to bounce back the next season. It won't be in their numbers, but you can be pretty sure that they're going to be coming back hard the next season. Other guys have really, really big breakout years. Was that because they really actually truly got better? Or did they just have a few lucky bounces go their way and their numbers are a little bit inflated? Typically, those guys you want to sell off because they're going to come back down to earth. And then you want to know how consistent the player is. Typically, there's a premium on guys that have big, big decisive scores. So if your player consistently can score 2 or 3 goals in a game and dominate a match, that's going to be more helpful than your defensive midfielder who always puts in 3 tackles, but never really gets above 50. Next, you want to know how confident you are in the player to start every single game. If they're not starting every single game, then there's a huge downgrade on the value that needs to be put in place in order to properly value the player. This also comes into play when you're talking about aging guys, so guys that are getting up there in age. Typically, you want to ask yourself, can the player play the full 34, 38 game season? If yes, then it doesn't really matter what their age is. If they can't play that full season, then you start to downgrade the value of that player based on age. And then are there any other extenuating circumstances? So for example, did a guy have a major injury that he may not be able to come back from? Did somebody ahead of the guy on the depth chart get transferred out? Or was somebody brought in at the same position in order to compete for time? All of these things need to go into your considerations when determining what value or what tier the player needs to be at. And then there are a few things that I like to throw on as a little bit of a bonus when I'm evaluating a player. If the player plays for their national team, then that's a nice little bonus as well, because you get a few extra games. If they play in whatever the region's Champions League is, that's a nice extra bonus because, again, you get a few extra games. And then I throw on a little bit of a bonus if they're the club captain. Just because it's much more difficult to replace the club captain, they're a lot more likely to stay at that same club and continue to repeat their numbers. And they're also not likely to get replaced by the club. So when you're trying to determine if you're going to be buying a player or not, those are the main things that you need to figure out what tier that player is in. Then you need to figure out what tier the guy that you're going to be replacing is in. But if you are buying a guy that's going to fit into your lineup, you need to make sure you figure out what tier the player you're going to buy is, what tier the player that you're going to be replacing in your lineup is, and then you need to make sure that there's some sort of an upgrade. Either you're keeping the same tier but the price is dropping, or you're going up a tier and you're keeping the same price. If you're buying a guy as an investment, this tier system doesn't matter as much, but make sure you have the overall market dynamics in mind when you're trying to buy an investment. So if you're thinking about an MLS investment right now, maybe not the best time to do so, as the prices are probably going to be dropping here in the next couple of months. However, if you're thinking about a European player, maybe coming up here in the next few months is a good time to be investing in them, as their season is about to end. You can carry a lot more investments when it's a good time for the market in general, and you want to sell off your investments when the market gets really, really high. This is going to depend mostly on what country your player plays in. That's it for the video today. Until the next time, Vamos United.